Hey, it's Coach Anderson from Mississippi Public Broadcasting Online, U.S. History from 1877 to present. And what we try to do with parts of our lessons, of course, is to give you an overview of the historical content that each lesson, of course, has. I mean, we'll give you a Part B also, and the Part B is designed to show you what some of the type of questions you might see when it comes to the state test. And what we're going to do today is we're going to pick up with post-war America and the Cold War, and this is going to be lesson number 9, and it's post-World War II. President Truman and Eisenhower assessed the evolving role of the United States in global affairs and domestic impact on national security, individual freedoms, and changing culture. And what we're trying to do here is give you some idea of what some of the types of questions that you may encounter are, so that you can be better equipped to answer them when you come across them. What we'll do is we'll start with the first question that we have here. And once again, all these test items that you're seeing here come from old retired state tests, and they provide a pretty good baseline for some of the types of questions that you'll need to be able to answer. During President Dwight Eisenhower's administration, brinkmanship became the policy of the United States. The strategy of brinkmanship meant that the United States was willing to commit to all-out war to contain communism. People in the United States were prepared for a nuclear conflict. How did President Eisenhower's support of brinkmanship affect society in the United States? A, media appearances by political leaders were limited. Government funding for science and education was expanded. Immigrant laborers found advancement in the workplace to be difficult, or minority groups found discrimination in the workplace to be widespread. Well, the best answer, and once again, all you have to do, of course, is refer back to some of the things that we gave you when we were talking about the facts. And the best answer is going to be B. Government funding for science and education was expanded, because we felt like that we were behind under the Eisenhower administration and the Kennedy administration, that we were behind the Soviet Union when it came to technology. This summary describes the FBI's Racial Matters program. Racial Matters was a secret program in which J. Edgar Hoover, the director of the FBI, used covert surveillance and counterintelligence program to follow, wiretap, and investigate African-American leaders like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. during the 1960s. Why did J. Edgar Hoover use the program described in this summary? A, he suspected the civil rights leaders were adversaries of his political party and he helped intimidate them. B, he considered civil rights leaders to be allies in the war against drugs and hoped to recruit them to be agents. C, he considered civil rights leaders to be dangerous intellectuals who held too much influence over political machines. D, he suspected that civil rights leaders had communist sympathies, but he lacked evidence to charge them with a crime. Well, the best answer in this particular case will be D, because he didn't consider them to be intellectuals that were influencing political machines. The war on drugs, he wasn't involved in the war on drugs. We talk about that a little bit later. All right, standard 8, how did the United States respond to the 1949 communist takeover in China? A, by supporting the North Vietnamese government of Ho Chi Minh, by recognizing Chiang Kai-shek's government in exile in Taiwan, by declaring war on the government of Mao Zedong, or by sending additional occupation forces to Japan. Once again, a lot of these things you can answer just by looking and knowing your facts. And the best answer in this case is by recognizing Chiang Kai-shek's government in exile in Taiwan. We won't recognize mainline and the Communist Chinese government until during the Nixon administration. What effect did the formation of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization and the Warsaw Pact have on Europe? Once again, we talked about the difference between the two. North Atlantic Treaty, or NATO, was for democratic nations aligned with the U.S. Communist nations in Eastern Europe that were aligned with the Soviet Union was the Warsaw Pact. And once again, if you know that from the facts, you should be in good shape. So what effect did the NATO and Warsaw Pact have? The alliances weakened the European economy. The alliances created further divisions within Europe. The alliances strengthened the economic power across Europe. The alliances created more peaceful relations between the European countries. Nope. The best answer is the alliances, in this particular case, created further divisions within Europe. The resolutions in this list were developed by the International Organization in 1948, 1966, 1968, 1984. But one of the things I know in 1948, I know that the organization that was created after World War II would have been the United Nations. So which of the international organizations responsible for the development of these resolutions? I don't think we have to go any further. And once again, if you paid attention to the fact list, League of Nations after World War I in the 19 teens, European Union much, much later, WTO later. So when you look at it, the best answer in this particular case is United Nations. 20, how did the Korean War affect the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union? A, the Korean War decreased Cold War tensions because troops were removed from the 38th parallel. So did it decrease tensions? Don't think so. The Korean War increased Cold War tensions because it changed the post-war competition into a military competition for the last few years. So we know it increased tensions, but did it do the second part? The Korean War increased Cold War tensions because it led to the United States and the Soviet Union from a policy of interventionism, isolationism. The Korean War decreased Cold War tensions because it led to the United States and the Soviet Union to agree that nuclear weapons would never be used. Well, we know that the Korean War didn't decrease tensions, so we know it can't be that, and it can't be that. So the only two options we got would be B or C. The Korean War increased Cold War tensions because it changed post-war competition and military competition that lasted for many years. We told you it lasted until 1991, so the best answer in this particular case is B. Which feature is more common during the Cold War than a conventional war? Well, we told you just by looking at the facts in the overview that we gave you that the Cold War was never a fight between the Soviet Union and the United States, or the United States and China. It was about, it was tension, it was competition. So which feature is more common during the Cold War than the conventional war? Indirect conflicts, military conflicts, many casualties, mass destruction. Well, all these things happen if fighting actually takes place. Here, that may or may not be the case, so the best answer is indirect conflicts. Circle the names of 4 countries who are areas of conflict between supporters of communism and supporters of democracy. Okay. China with Chiang Kai-shek and Mao Zedong. Okay. They had a revolution in Hungary, Fidel Castro in Cuba, and then in Poland. So the only 2 places where communism wasn't an issue was Italy and France. The chart describes some events that occurred following the end of World War II. Part A, which conclusion can be made about the events described in the chart? These events led to incidents that further increased tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union. Okay. These events have forced the United States and the Soviet Union to continually work together to rebuild war-torn Europe. So did the United States of America and the Soviet Union actually work together? Don't think so. Western European nations attempted to use these events to reduce tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union. The United States and the Soviet Union initiated each event to strengthen economic ties between Eastern and Western Europe. It wasn't about strengthening ties between them. It's about trying to get them, one group on one side, one group on the other side. So these events led to incidents that further increased tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union, and that would probably be the best answer. The best answer is that one. So, all right, look at the next thing we got. This chart describes some events that occurred following the end of World War II. Same chart, second question, based on the same chart. So part A, we just answered, now part B. What was one long-term effect of the events described in this chart? The economies of countries in Eastern Europe thrived, diplomatic relations between East and West improved. These events led to indirect conflicts between the United States and the Soviet Union. Come on now. We can answer the other one. We can answer that one. Which statement describes how the Truman Doctrine contributed to the breakdown of relations between the United States and the Soviet Union? The Truman Doctrine threatened the Soviet Union by providing military equipment to France and Great Britain. The Truman Doctrine threatened the Soviet Union by providing funds to build U.S. Air Force bases in Spain and Italy. The Truman Doctrine gave economic aid to Greece and Turkey, which threatened the Soviet Union's sphere of influence. The Truman Doctrine instituted economic sanctions on Poland and Hungary, which threatened the Soviet Union's sphere of influence. The best answer is that one. Greece and Turkey were 2 countries after WWII where the Soviet Union had some undue influence. So when you look at the assessment items, once again, you notice that some of the questions, of course, we had to circle answers. There are going to be questions where we have to underline answers from paragraphs. So, and there are going to be questions where we'll have one particular, graphic that we use to answer multiple questions. Those are some of the types of questions that you have to get used to answering. And if you master those, you'll be in good shape. This is Coach Anderson from Mississippi Public Broadcasting Online, U.S. History from 1877 to present. We hope you paid attention to some of those test items. Don't be surprised that you might see something that looks a little bit like them when you take the actual state test. With that, we'll see you next time.